So welcome back. My name is Paul. A lot of people know my YouTube section. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about a really interesting subject, which is very hot these days. Basically the origin of man and the works of Zecharia Sitchin and many others. And because I only have a short time, I'm going to make it short here. A couple authors, really good. I'm reading this book now. Lawrence Gardner did an excellent amount of research into the writings of the Sumerians. The Sumerian culture was our best and oldest or well-known early civilization that seemed to have just sprung up from nowhere somewhere around 4000 BC roughly, and very incredible. Now, Zecharia Sitchin is a researcher. He's been all over the world, and he is just an incredible guy. Very few people actually go and try to translate the old text. There's the Sumerians left us, tens of thousands apparently of various kinds of tablet writings on clay. And because they're on clay and kept dry, they've lasted for thousands of years. And they tell just a fantastic story that predated the Hebrew Bible and actually is the source. And they have a story to tell that'll just blow your mind. And I'll tell you a little bit about it just to get us started here. A lot of people know this already, so I'll just kind of go over it. But basically, according to Sitchin and their Sumerian, they said that there was another large planetary system kind of thing that went around every 3,600 years. They would get close to the Earth. And during that time, there was one planet around that system that had beings on it, and these beings were actually they were humanoid, and they discovered this planet, and they needed some resources, and they came here with machines. They brought their bodies here, but they had an incredible amount of advanced science. And at one point they were mining here. This is the story that the Sumerians say, that long time ago, this goes a long time ago, they needed some workers. They figured, well, we don't want to do all this labor with the mining. We need to have somebody help us. So they genetically engineered using there are many different kinds of human-like, ape-like creatures that we know there were the Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon and so on. But basically the principle was that they found a suitable one, and they modified it genetically, and that went along for a while. And at some point, they were kind of wild and crazy, and they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And these so-called gods who had come here, they basically just said, well, they had a debate. They said, we got to get rid of these things. I mean, this is a crazy story, but this is kind of like what they're saying. And so they had this big flood that maybe a pole shift or something happened, or they knew it was going to happen. They didn't, but then there was a debate among some of these so-called gods, of which they said apparently 600 had been brought down to Earth, that lived around the Earth in the machines, and then 300 were up in the space around. And this is sort of a rough, quick, brief overview of the story. That basically, after that flood, there's some beings were warned, and they kept, apparently there was technology they used. They kept the genetic, seed of human beings and so on alive, and they restarted civilization. There's many myths about this, and that was somewhere around 4000 BC. But the original so-called Adam, the original man that had been cloned or modified genetically, had been a long time before that. And that's why we have the Cro-Magnon men that suddenly on the Earth there seem to be these really advanced types of people. Okay, so bottom line is, you go forward here, and eventually these so-called gods taught people civilization. Sumeria just kind of sprung up in the middle, and it just seemed like, wow, where did this all come from? They had engineers, they had doctors, they had law, they had medicine. I mean, they had all kinds of stuff, completely their own language, very unique language, written script. And this is the story they told. So basically, the question comes down to, are there other these beings, and who are we? And essentially, what the story is, that we literally are genetically, the vast majority of people on this planet right now are genetically part of that modified alien, ET, God, so-called stuff. And in the aftermath of the big catastrophe, there were some of these good beings that said, well, we want the humans to learn nice laws and be socially responsible. We'll have a king system, and we'll have like a government and all this stuff. And then there was always a debate whether how much education, how much learning should people have, because if people have too much learning, if, for example, we know as a human race we have gotten hold of machinery and technology that has basically come very close to wiping us off the planet, and there's a real danger. So now here we're getting to this point where the so-called Illuminati, whatever, it's a weird whole thing, but basically is all human beings on the earth have the right and the need to get as much education and learning as possible about who they are, what this body is, what they can do, what their consciousness can do, and all that stuff. And then there's probably some people who might be symbolized by the dark side. They want to have the power, they don't want to share, they don't want to cooperate, they don't want to live together, they want to be dominant, they want to control, they don't want other people to have education and bond together, and so on. Now, that sets up this whole thing of a battle between the good and the evil. Now, a lot of it was centered around this so-called thing, the tree of knowledge. Now, if you know something, like if you know that you're a lion, not a sheep, and they realize that you've been like walking around with all these sheep all your life and eating grass or whatever, that's the thing. Now, human beings can awaken in a very short time to understand, look, we have an incredible amount of potential here, and the mysteries of the universe or God or human origins are far more fantastic than and we have the stories, it's just that we don't believe them, because you look at some of these stories, the Bible, the ancient Bible, is really not an accurate translation of the source materials. The source materials go back to Sumeria, and they actually had scribes. They trained people. They were highly educated people. They didn't just write a bunch of fantasy. They said, this is what we know. This is the science of our day. This is the history of our day. And if we don't pay attention to that, that leaves us ignorant. We have to start learning about who we are as human beings, what we can do, and the science of how we can recognize our full potential has been taught for thousands and thousands of years. It's just that a lot of people, when they hear about it, they don't catch it. It's like, well, no, I think I'd rather watch TV. Oh, yeah. And, that old, like, the sports thing. And in closing, just a little thought about how, these sports games, people, like, get out there and they're like, I'm this number one person, and I have this thing on my finger that says I'm number one. And I mean, you can imagine, like, other kinds of beings that might say, well, just when you cut that out, you might make me laugh here, and I'm trying not to laugh. And, there's a lot more even to yourself than what you think. So that's all for now. I have to go on to our next segment. And so thanks for watching.